It's the Progress Pod, a production of the Franklin County Coalition for Progress. I'm Pete Mazzoni. The 2016 election will be remembered for many things, but perhaps one of the most interesting outcomes will be the number of female candidates now running for office. While President Trump inspires many in his base, he has also inspired those who oppose him. The citizen candidate is an idea that harkens back to our founders, who initially envisioned politicians that would work their farms and then be called to session every so often to deal with governmental issues. Now, that model seems quaint as we see politicians whose entire lives are spent in the halls of our government, but perhaps now it is on the return. With us today is one such candidate, Emily Best, running for State Senate in our District 30 to replace John Eichelberger. Hi, Emily. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm sorry I can't be with you in the studio, but I'm glad we're able to work something out for this busy schedule.
Yeah. Thanks for getting us in. So let's start with just a little bit of background on you. Tell us kind of a little bit about your story.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Butler County in western Pennsylvania and attended University of Pittsburgh for my undergrad. I spent some time in my 20s living and working overseas, and then came back, got a master's degree in environmental policy, focusing on agricultural issues in Washington, D.C. Went back overseas in the Peace Corps in West Africa and Senegal. And then I still really wanted to get my hands dirty and learn more about farming, especially local farming. And so that's how I ended up in central Pennsylvania. I started working at New Morning Farm, which is in southern Huntingdon County. I was an apprentice there, and I worked in the field. I helped transplant, weed, harvest, pack different things, and I sold at our farmers markets down in Washington, D.C. And, you know, I expected to get a job in policy, and so I just wanted to stay at the farm for 1 year and just get that experience and then move back to D.C., maybe to New York City, and, you know, get that office job, helping in an NGO maybe. But as the season went on at the farm, I realized that I really loved my job there. And so I ended up staying there for 4 seasons and kind of settling in this area. And then after my 4th season, a position opened up at the cooperative called Tuscarora Organic Growers, of which New Morning Farm was a founding member. And so now I'm the general manager there, and I've been there for over 2 years, and now live in McConnellsburg in Fulton County with my family. I have 2 stepdaughters in grade school and a 15-month-old son and a partner who also works in agriculture. And so it's been a long road, a little bit circuitous getting to central PA, and never expected to end up in a place like Fulton County, so rural. But here I am, and I love living here.
You thought you were going to be walking up and down Fifth Avenue for fun.
When I was growing up in Butler, I was really like wanting to get out of the small town and wanted to get to a city and have just more experiences. And, I did that for several years and did a lot of traveling, saw a lot of different places and lived different places. And then when I got here in central PA, I just really fell in love and didn't really want to leave. And now it's my home, and it is surprising to me that this is where I've ended up, but this is it.
Yeah, life has a way of doing that. So with everything you've accomplished and all that you're involved in, with a very busy family, a very busy career, why are you running for office now? Tell us the motivation.
Well, there's many motivations. I've always believed in the power of policymaking. It can seem esoteric and that it doesn't really affect people, but I believe that it really does make a difference. Who's making policy, what their goals are, what their experiences are, and where they come from, and who they're representing. And so I believed that for a long time. And I think deep down, I always knew I would run for office someday. I didn't really think it would be so soon. But I think after the 2016 election particularly, but even prior to that, I started realizing that even though I thought of myself as politically involved because I, would volunteer on presidential campaigns, I'd knock doors, I'd make phone calls, I'd do donations, I realized that I wasn't paying attention to state races very much.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I was a good voter because I voted every 4 years and maybe sometimes in the primary even. But then I realized, wait, there's elections every year, and I'm not showing up for them. And I thought I was politically involved. So if I'm not showing up, there must be way more people who also, aren't tuning in at all. And so I started paying more attention, and I realized here in Central PA, like many places in Pennsylvania, there's too many uncontested races, especially at the state level, and even more locally. And that our state reps and state senators, once they become an incumbent, especially, it's just like rubber stamps every 2 years, every 4 years. And there's no debate. And there's no talking out the views. There's no holding that legislator accountable.
Right. There's no pushback.
Yeah. And so I think that that's a big motivation for me. I can understand to a certain point why a lot of folks in this area voted for Donald Trump. There's a lot of things I disagree with him on, of course. But, speaking with people that I've worked with on the farm and in the community, people are really fed up about a lot of things. And one of those things is that, the government isn't serving the people very well anymore. Maybe that's due to the money in politics, gerrymandering. There's a lot of different issues. And I think that, one of Donald Trump's messages was that he was going to do it differently. And I think people are just fed up and they wanted something different. And they felt, a bit let down by Obama, and especially with healthcare, which we can talk about.
We can
later.
Definitely get into that. Okay, I wanted to get to another question, and I think you're kind of moving towards addressing it. But I didn't mention this before, but you are running as a Democrat. So help us understand what your belief systems are regarding being a member of the Democrat Party. Yeah,
so for me, let me just say my parents are both small business people. My dad had his family insurance business, and my mom is in private practice as a licensed social worker doing therapy. And I think especially with their backgrounds and their outlooks, they always voted Democratic. That was how I was raised. But also as I got older, I realized that was the party that I felt represented me best. Mm-hmm. That I really appreciated that it seemed like the Democrats do more to address issues of equality, address issues particularly for women and children, that they recognize that while the private sector is very important in our country, that sometimes the private sector leaves people out, and those are often the most vulnerable among us. So, I think there's a lot of reasons, but I have been a Democrat, and I felt that, it would be dishonest of me to switch parties due to the area where we live, due to the registration numbers, to try and run as something else. And so, as a Democrat, I'm running as a Democrat.
Yeah, and you'd also be contested in the primary, whereas where you're probably not being contested, or you weren't contested in the primary. Also, the term is Democratic Party.
Producer Jeremy was going to jump in there and get you, Pete.
All right, lesson learned.
My pet peeve. All right.
Okay, so let's get into some of the issues. Your constituents are coming to you, and they're bringing up healthcare. This is such a big, tricky issue. Now, at the state level, which is where you'd be operating, what do you think you can truly affect and make happen for the citizens of Pennsylvania?
Well, I think there's a lot of options that we have. One of them is building and strengthening a Pennsylvania-based healthcare system. So we've seen it in states like Massachusetts, which, when Mitt Romney was the governor, he led what would be the template for Obamacare
Romneycare
in Massachusetts. Romney Care, And so I think that there are options for Pennsylvanians to look at to say, how can we provide better coverage to, our citizens, our kids, our senior citizens, and folks who aren't covered through their jobs. And so I have a full-time job. I've, worked my whole adult life. And I've actually never once had employer-provided health insurance because of the fields that I've been working in. And there's a lot of people who are left out of that system. And so I've been on, the Marketplace Obamacare since it was established pretty much. And over those years, I've become more and more frustrated with it as costs have gone up and, the premiums have gone up, deductibles have gone up, and the options have been fewer and fewer each year because it's harder for the companies to work in it.
Right.
Yeah, so I think that, I would like Pennsylvania to look at what we could do as a state instead of working on this federal marketplace.
I
see
agree.
If there's ways, we can provide better coverage that's not as expensive for our citizens here. And additionally, there's just so many problems with Obamacare, and I will say, from the beginning, I was very supportive of it. And in many ways, I still am, because I do believe that everybody should have coverage.
Right.
Nobody should be left out and feel like they can't go to the doctor.
Or
and
end up just going to the emergency
in
room.
That direction, Yeah. And I think part of, again, here's another issue, our opioid crisis is partially, I think, because health care, and particularly mental health care, can be so inaccessible to people based on cost or based on the fact that the resources have been slowly cut and cut and cut, that there aren't providers located where we need them. There aren't centers where we need them. And so we're seeing what happens when we cut apart our, healthcare coverage network. So I think,
how do you respond to a constituent who adamantly opposes any form of socialized healthcare? And I know you've got a lot of constituents that do, despite the fact that your district is not what we're going to call one of the wealthier districts in Pennsylvania. And I'm sure there's any number of Medicaid and Medicare recipients there. So what is your counter argument to everyone should fend for themselves, or the old skin in the game argument that people want to bring up?
Yeah. Well, I just had this discussion with a potential constituent just the other night, actually. And the skin in the game thing, I'm not against that. I think that, if there's some sort of sliding scale type of fee structure, that to me makes sense. But I think it has to be comprehensive enough that it doesn't leave people out. And what we're seeing now, and my family actually went through this, where my partner, if he made too much money, he could not afford his health insurance premium. Right. But if he had a couple $100 less per month, then his premium would have been much, much less.
Right.
But
it's
that's
disincentivizing.
Have.
Yeah, it's disincentivized. It's like the welfare model: make too much money, lose benefits.
Exactly. And so I think, that's something that needs to be fixed. Now, as for folks who, really don't want to be told what they should be getting, I think that's really tough, because in the insurance business, the bigger the pool, the better it is for everybody. So it is hard to say, in this type of region where, individual, liberty is really very important for some people to have. I think more than that, there's a lot of people out there who had care or had insurance previous to Obamacare's mandates coming in. And remember how Obama said, you won't have to change your doctor, you won't have to change your plan.
Are you kidding? How could we forget that? They drilled it into our heads every day.
Yes, and people in this area, they did have to change their doctor, and they had to change their plan, and it became more expensive, and they lost choices. And I think people remembered that years later, that they were lied to, and they had to change something that was very important to them. Of course, like your relationship with your doctor is very important. And I think, So, I mean, I think that it's a small minority of people who really, don't want anything, because I think people do recognize that, like, they need to go to the doctor sometimes and they need to have the care accessible to them, but they don't want to be forced to, like, pick a doctor that's in the next county. They don't want to be forced to have this, like, high premium. They want to have something that makes sense for them. And so maybe that's part of how we move forward, is making certain types of cheaper plans available that actually are cheaper, and not that it's like the bronze plans on the marketplace, which have a smaller premium but a huge deductible. Like, we have to find a way to make this work for people and not make it so geared towards the insurance companies actually, making these profits from it.
I think you just hit on the solution, actually, and that is get the insurance companies out of it. There's a lot of money going to the middlemen and not making its way to providers or people who need services. So yeah, we definitely agree with that. And I guess from my perspective, and I don't know what you think, Jeremy, but the analogy of having to purchase auto insurance. You want to drive, you got to have it. I mean, I don't understand why, and the same counter arguments could be made. Well, I don't want to have to pay for other people's accidents. Well, too bad. You are right now. Yeah. And so I don't really understand why that doesn't stick, especially from the fact of that this is your health. This is...
At some point, everybody's going to be having to use healthcare.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially in the rural parts of the district, people who are really used to fending for themselves, which is something to be proud of in many ways. And I think it's not so long ago that in these communities, there might have been like a family doctor, and you paid what you could, or maybe you even bartered with them or something. It was less formalized. And as the system's modernized and becoming more full of bureaucracy, and it's becoming more expensive, I think that's also, what people are really pushing back on, because that community aspect of care has been removed. And, I would like to see more community of care coming back into our region, because I think, part of the profit-driven aspect of our current healthcare system means that the rural areas become underserved because it's harder to make money there.
Right. Not enough people.
So, we need to figure out how do we get it back to the place where, you can call a doctor, at any time, or you don't have to like make an appointment 3 weeks in advance. Or even just like, I have a young kid, he has gotten pink eye, and it's like, if it happens on the weekend in McConnellsburg, your choices are go to the emergency room, or you drive up and over the mountain and come over to the Chambersburg urgent care, or you wait until Monday morning.
For those who don't know, that's a very long drive.
Yeah, and it's in the winter, you might not want to be on the mountain.
Right.
And so our system is just leaving people out, and it's making people turn against the system even more. And I think like what we need, and what in many issues in my campaign, is like, we need to figure out how to come back together, make things work for all of us, and just move forward with a lot of these things, because where we're at now, it's just making people so frustrated that they are just disengaging altogether, or they're casting votes that are very reactionary and saying like, we need a big change. Let's just, go with somebody who doesn't have any type of experience in any of these issues, because they can be the ones to shake them up. So, yeah, I mean, healthcare, it's definitely one of my big three issues on the campaign trail, because it really does affect me personally.
Now, are your opponents, are they taking kind of the Trump line of Obamacare bad, let's get rid of it? I mean, how are they positioning themselves in this important debate?
I can't really answer that. There's two candidates on the Republican side. I've interacted much more with one of them, and the other I really haven't seen out on the campaign trail very much, and so I actually don't really know what her position is.
Okay, very good. Answer is Medicaid for all. I want to move on to another topic that at the talk you gave, or the meet and greet you had a couple weeks ago here in Chambersburg, one of the candidates brought up dairy farmers. I don't know if you recall that, his argument about why he left the Democratic Party because they forgot about the small man. And I noticed on your Facebook page you got into this situation. Can you talk a little bit about what dairy farmers are experiencing in your area and what you might be able to do to remedy their issues?
Yeah, so what's going on in dairy, but also in a lot of commoditized agriculture, is that there's a lot of power and money concentrated, you might say at the top or among very few. And so it's very consolidated. And what that means is that the small farmer has less and less power because somebody else is controlling, a lot of the market decisions that are being made. And that in dairy, what that means is that the price that they're getting for their product is lower than the cost of production. So that's happening. At the same time, as we're seeing more corporate consolidation, we're seeing some of these companies cancel or end their contracts with the farm. And that just happened recently because one of the big buyers became more vertically integrated. And so they told some of their small farmers, oh, we don't need you anymore because we're going to have our own farms, our own, dairies on board, and we don't need the individual farms.
If I could just interrupt for a second here, a link to an article you had on your Facebook page. It discussed antitrust regulations as a way to restore more of a fair and balanced free market to the dairy farmer. Is that something you'd be potentially looking at in kind of what they're called New Deal era ideas?
Yes. I mean, I think that we do need to look at that, and not just in dairy, but in many other sectors in our economy. It's a big problem with healthcare that we were just talking about as well. We're seeing the slow creep of, a few very big healthcare hospitals and insurance companies across our state. It's also a big problem in media. We've seen, the news stories about Sinclair Media owning 60-70% of TV stations in the area. So over the past, 20 plus years, we've just seen more and more consolidation of many, many things in our economy. And I think that it's, there's this idea that, there's a free market, but there really is not a free market because so many sectors are being consolidated in just a few huge corporations.
Yeah, that's a myth. I agree.
Yeah.
And that goes to, if I can head in a different direction now, lobbyists, campaign money. I mean, the reason that these corporations can get all this consolidation done goes through lobbying, that goes through Harrisburg. How are you going to handle that? Because if you want to run again, or if your campaign really takes off, it's going to take a lot of money. So how are you going to kind of deal with this situation?
Yes. So far, I've raised a little bit of money from my friends and family, both in Pennsylvania and outside of it, because as I've mentioned, I've lived in all different types of places. I have family all over, and they're all very supportive and excited and have donated to my campaign. And I think that that's how people should do it. And it's one of those really tough issues because some people say, well, if you have to play in the system to change the system. And so they say, well, you need to take the super PAC money, on a larger scale, of course. You would take this money, and then when you get in power, then you can change the rules. But, I mean, I'm skeptical of that. I feel like there has to be a better way. And so, for my campaign, I'm only going to be working with, the small dollar donations from my friends and family and supporters. I'm not interested in taking money from, organizations or the PACs. If a PAC wants to work with me, I'd appreciate, their help on the ground maybe, but I don't want to take money that's going to make me beholden to a certain point of view. And I think that, I would like to see publicly financed elections. I think we need to really look at how our elections are conducted, especially federal elections and presidential elections, because they spend so much money and they go on for so long. And if you look at other large developed countries, it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be so.
Yeah, I think the UK is something like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It's either 2 or 6 weeks, and you cannot campaign outside of that. You're stuck to that time period.
Well, in U.S. congressional seats, it's just a constant campaign
they never stop
because
campaigning.
the terms are only 2 years. So
Right. Always generating money. Well, that would make it tricky for you in Harrisburg because ultimately, I don't think the people who said you have to work within the system to change the system are entirely wrong. And I think that you might find yourself, looking for allies. And I just feel like it's hard to really to get there without taking somebody's money. Do you think that's possible?
Yeah. I hope so. I know that it is expensive, to put ads on TV and to do the billboards and all of that stuff. And, I'm only one person, so I can only talk to so many people at any given, day or event. But, I hope that more people get involved in general, not just, in my campaign, but in politics in general, and who will spend time on it and do the volunteer work somewhat, making phone calls and knocking doors. Because if we have more people who are stepping up to say, okay, I want to be involved in this process, then maybe we don't need as much money.
Yeah. And let's get to that. You're out there meeting and greeting people all over the state, really. What are your feelings as you talk to the voters about their level of engagement? Are they excited? Are they up on the issues? Are they despondent? What kind of feedback are you getting?
Well, of course, if I'm going to an event that's, of candidates meet and greet, the people who come are definitely engaged. So far I've been meeting with people who are interested in the process, are already looped in. But in general, it seems like on both sides or all sides that people are getting just pretty fed up, and they want to see their politicians doing something to represent them. I think people in general feel like there's too much money in politics, that the representatives, in Harrisburg and in Congress both, aren't thinking of their constituents back home, and they're not doing what's best for them. And I think also, I saw a study online, of course it's online, who knows, but it was saying something about the different parties' interests in compromise. And it said that both, Democrats and Republicans right now are at their least willing to compromise than ever before. But that's not really what I'm hearing people say, individuals, when I'm talking with them about issues. I had a very interesting conversation recently with some pretty hardcore Republicans, and we were really getting into the Second Amendment, gun control issues. And, we went back and forth a little bit in a very open and friendly engagement. But we found some points that we definitely agreed on and that we felt would make progress to improve some of the safety issues that we've been having around guns. And I think that we really do need more of that type of dialogue of people who maybe, and you might stereotype as disagreeing, but that, when you sit down and you actually talk with people about the issues, that there is common ground, and they, people want their representatives, to address these issues and not just take votes that don't go anywhere for vanity's sake or whatever else.
Yeah, but that's on the individual level. The old saying, an individual can be thoughtful, kind, and then when we move on to the groupthink, all that, compromise becomes a dirty word. So it sounds to me like you're taking the position, what we'll call center left, willing to compromise, willing to work, as they say, across the aisle. And I personally find that promising, and I agree that is what is needed in order to get things done. We're just about to wrap it up here. I wanted to ask one question and then allow you some time to give us any final thoughts. What do you think your chances are? Glass half full.
I think it's, there's a long time between now and November. There's a primary on the Republican side that I think
get rid of some of your opponents.
Will be interesting to see who comes out ahead. And I think, it really, as in every election, just comes down to turnout and how engaged voters are. And if we can especially sign up some new young voters in the district, because I think that, high school kids who are graduating, who are 18, I think they're starting to get more engaged than in past years. So, I think it's definitely not seen as a super competitive race, but, as long as there's someone on the ballot and I'm on the ballot, you never know what can happen.
No, I totally agree. I think you've got a lot of great bona fides, in terms of your work, your family situation. And I also feel like the electorate can do anything at any time these days. I mean, we just don't know anymore. So any final thoughts you want to share with us before we wrap up?
My main thought is that even if my campaign is not victorious this year, I think that Democrats and, any party in the minority needs to be organizing every year and needs to be engaged, needs to run candidates and make the effort to get out and talk with people and get more people involved in the process, because even if you don't vote, even if you think all politicians are crooks, they're still making decisions that impact your life every day.
Most definitely are.
And so, I really want to try to show people that, I'm a regular person, maybe a little bit crazy for doing this, but in general, I have a very normal life,
right?
With everyday concerns that everyone else has.
Right.
I'm raising a family, working full time, trying to make nice meals for the family and do all the things that everyone is just trying to do. And I think that we need more people, everyday people, to run for these offices to bring, real life back to our legislature, eventually back to Congress, and have people in those seats who are making decisions for the people and not forgetting about them.
Totally agree. And that's why that's why in my monologue I mentioned the citizen candidate, because that's how you appear to me. You appear to me as a true citizen candidate. Well, I want to thank you very much. Did you have something else you want to say?
No, I just, want people to get out there and get engaged and don't become too cynical and turned off from the process, because It can be for the people again.
Yeah, we can make it better. Emily, best wishes out there on the campaign trail. Keep up the good fight. Thank you for coming on the show today, and I'm going to turn it over to producer Jeremy.
Yeah, thanks for coming on today, and we'll look forward to having you again before November if you agree to come back.
Yeah, and, thank you again so much for having me.
You bet. Hopefully we can get you in person next time. Yeah. Before we go, Pete, I thought I'd mention the next Common Grounds that's going to be taking place at the library. They happen every second Saturday of the month, and the next one is going to be with District Attorney Matt Fogel. He'll be talking about the opioid crisis in Franklin County. And these events are put on by the Franklin County Coalition for Progress, which we're a part of. And they're at the library in downtown Chambersburg, up in the conservatory, the upper level. And free coffee provided by Brussels Cafe at these. So
I hear their coffee is top notch.
I hear that too.
Sponsorship?
Right. We're also looking forward to, we haven't reached out to them yet, but we're looking to have Brent Ottaway on in the near future. I think he's the sole Democratic candidate for the new 13th congressional district. So we'll look forward to hearing from him soon.
The end of the Schuster era.
Yeah, apparently so. Yep. So that's coming up, and I guess we're gonna do a TransSource show.
We're looking to get together the TransSource people. It's just a logistical issue, but they have some public commentary coming up. New Franklin Fire Hall, I believe it's May 9th. But it's an important issue, especially if you're local. This is big. This is a big deal.
So, those things coming up. So stay tuned, and thanks for listening. You can find us on iTunes. Search in the iTunes store for the Progress Pod. You can subscribe and rate us there.
5 stars.
And we have our SoundCloud page. How else?
The best Twitter on the internet.
Find us on Twitter at The Progress Pod.
The Progress Pod. You'll laugh. You'll cry.
And you can find us at progresspod.org, which actually takes you to the coalition page, but we've got a button there at the top you can click on.
If you know how to use your computer properly,
you'll find us. Yep.
All right.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right,
Catch you next time.
Bye.